James Dobson, who died in 2025 at the age of 89, was far more than just a psychologist or a familiar voice on the radio. He was the chief architect of the religious right, a movement that would fundamentally reshape American politics for generations. Dobson's influence reached far beyond his books and broadcasts. He became a cultural force, a strategist who understood the power of faith in the public square. He transformed the Republican Party, shifting its focus from traditional fiscal conservatism to a platform dominated by rigid social issues like abortion, same-sex marriage, and school prayer. Dobson's vision was to make these moral concerns central to the party's identity, a legacy that still shapes American politics today, influencing debates and elections at every level. Dobson's true genius was in connecting deeply held personal faith to public policy, urging millions of evangelicals to see voting not just as a civic responsibility, but as a sacred moral duty. He inspired a generation to believe that their religious convictions should guide their choices at the ballot box, making faith and politics inseparable for many. Through his organization, Focus on the Family, Dobson built a direct line to a powerful and organized voting bloc. He used radio, newsletters, and conferences to teach that faith demanded political action, mobilizing families and churches across the country to become active participants in the political process. He broke down the wall between church and state, convincing his followers that their values were under constant attack and must be defended at the ballot box. Dobson's message was clear. To protect their way of life, Christians had to engage in politics as a form of spiritual defense. By framing politics as a spiritual battle, Dobson created a fiercely loyal movement that no GOP hopeful could afford to ignore. He made political engagement feel like a calling, a mission that transcended party lines and became a matter of faith. With Dobson's passing, an era comes to a close. Yet the political structures, alliances, and strategies he built remain deeply embedded in the modern Republican Party, continuing to shape its direction and priorities long after his voice has faded from the airwaves. Dobson's worldview was forged in the strict Church of the Nazarene, a denomination known for its unwavering commitment to holiness and moral discipline. His father, a traveling evangelist, was both a spiritual leader and a stern disciplinarian, instilling in young Dobson a deep sense of obedience and respect for divine authority. The family's life revolved around church services, revivals, and the constant presence of Scripture. At home, Dobson's upbringing was defined by rigid rules and a patriarchal hierarchy: God, Father, family, presented as unchangeable truth. Every aspect of daily life was governed by a clear sense of order, with little room for negotiation or personal expression. Questioning was discouraged, discipline was swift and seen as love. Children were expected to submit without protest, and any sign of rebellion was met with correction, always justified as an act of care. This black-and-white thinking shaped Dobson's later teachings, where disagreement was framed as moral failure. He learned early that there was little space for ambiguity, right and wrong were sharply defined, and compromise was not an option. He believed parenting meant breaking a child's will to align it with God's authority, justifying physical discipline as necessary. In his view, a strong hand was not only appropriate, but essential for raising children who would honor God and family. Dobson saw himself as a servant of God, not a political operative, delivering what he called timeless truths. He felt a profound responsibility to uphold the values he was taught, believing his mission was spiritual rather than partisan. His unshakable conviction made him a powerful voice for those anxious about social change, and a polarizing figure for everyone else. To his followers, he offered certainty in a world they saw as increasingly chaotic. To his critics, he represented inflexibility and intolerance. The certainty of his beliefs, rooted in childhood, became the foundation of his influence, shaping not only his own life, but the lives of millions who would come to follow his teachings. Dobson's book, The Strong-Willed Child, became a manual for conservative Christian parenting, advocating corporal punishment as both effective and biblically mandated. He taught that defiance must be met with decisive force, framing discipline as an act of love, not anger. Dobson's approach was about breaking a child's will, establishing a clear power dynamic rooted in fear. Critics argue this method causes lasting psychological harm, teaching that power and violence resolve conflict. He enforced strict gender roles, boys as leaders, girls as helpers, leaving little room for individuality. Many raised under Dobson's teachings describe a childhood of fear and suppressed identity, with trauma that lingers into adulthood. While Dobson promised order and godliness, for many, his methods created authoritarian households and emotional scars. His legacy is a blueprint for control over connection, obedience over love. Dobson's shift from psychologist to political powerhouse was both strategic and transformative, marking a turning point not just in his own life, but in the trajectory of American politics. Originally known for his expertise in family counseling, Dobson recognized the growing influence of evangelical Christians and saw an opportunity to channel their values into political action. He mobilized evangelicals around hot-button issues like abortion and family values, transforming focus on the family from a counseling ministry into a formidable political machine. Under his leadership, the organization became a rallying point for millions who felt their voices were ignored in Washington. Republican candidates, from Reagan to Trump, actively sought Dobson's endorsement, fully aware that his word could mobilize millions of dedicated evangelical voters. His approval became a coveted prize, often seen as essential for any Republican hoping to win the presidency. Dobson set strict litmus tests for candidates, demanding unwavering support for his social agenda. In doing so, he forced the GOP to adopt positions on issues like same-sex marriage, school prayer, and abortion, fundamentally reshaping the party's platform. His influence was pivotal in key elections, most notably helping secure George W. Bush's 2004 victory by energizing evangelical voters and ensuring high turnout in crucial swing states. Dobson's ability to mobilize faith-based communities made him a kingmaker behind the scenes. He provided detailed voter guides, organized church-based campaigns, and framed elections as spiritual battles for the soul of the nation. Through radio broadcasts and newsletters, he urged Christians to see voting as a moral duty. Even in semi-retirement, Dobson's support for Trump was driven by the promise of appointing conservative judges, especially to the Supreme Court. He saw the courts as the ultimate battleground for America's values and future. His activism continued into the 2020s, including efforts to overturn the 2020 election results, demonstrating his enduring commitment to reshaping America according to his vision. Dobson's influence extended far beyond the pulpit or the airwaves. Dobson's legacy is clear. He stands as one of the most effective and influential political operatives of his generation, leaving a lasting mark on both the religious and political landscape of the United States. After leaving academia, Dobson founded Focus on the Family in 1977, building a media empire from a modest radio show. His daily broadcasts reached millions, offering faith-based solutions and reinforcing his conservative agenda. The operation expanded to magazines, books, films, and curricula, creating a closed ecosystem for his followers. Focus on the Family became a one-stop shop for advice on parenting, marriage, and politics, all filtered through Dobson's lens. He used his platforms to issue calls to action, mobilizing a grassroots army on command. Lawmakers took notice, wary of crossing Dobson's vast network. His brand of family values, patriarchal, anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ+, became the standard for millions. Dobson's media empire proved the power of modern media to shape belief and drive political action. Dobson was a relentless opponent of LGBTQ+ rights, using his media reach to portray queer people as threats to families and society. He promoted conversion therapy and gave platforms to ex-gay ministries, causing immense harm and shame within conservative communities. Dobson's activism helped pass same-sex marriage bans and fund legal groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, which continue to fight LGBTQ+ equality. His rhetoric fueled a culture of fear and hostility, embedding anti-LGBTQ+ sentiment deep within the Republican Party. Today's wave of anti-trans legislation and book bans are direct descendants of Dobson's moral panic. His legacy is a climate of intolerance that endangers LGBTQ+ Americans. For Dobson, abortion was the central moral battle of his life. He galvanized the anti-abortion movement, making opposition to Roe v. Wade a litmus test for Republican candidates. Through Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council, he built a nationwide activist network focused on appointing conservative judges. Dobson's support for Trump was driven by the promise to overturn Roe, a goal realized in 2022 with the Dobbs decision. This victory was the culmination of Dobson's 50-year campaign, fundamentally altering the legal landscape. While celebrated by supporters, the result is a deeply divided nation where reproductive rights depend on geography. Dobson's crusade left a lasting, controversial mark on American society. Dobson's politics were rooted in authoritarianism, order, obedience, and control over liberty and compromise. He taught followers to see opponents as enemies of God, fueling a zero-sum spiritual warfare mentality. His patriarchal family model mirrored his vision for society: absolute authority, no room for dissent. Dobson encouraged distrust of institutions he couldn't control, fostering a culture of grievance and conspiracy. The GOP's embrace of strongman politics and disregard for democratic norms echoed Dobson's teachings. He convinced millions they were under siege, justifying uncompromising tactics and even political violence. Today's rigid, fear-driven politics are the logical outcome of Dobson's legacy. Dobson's passing closes a chapter on one of America's most divisive figures. To followers, he was a defender of Christian values and a prophet warning of moral decline. To critics, he exploited fear and prejudice, leaving a legacy of psychological abuse, anti-LGBTQ+ hate, and toxic polarization. Dobson reshaped the GOP into a vehicle for Christian nationalism, fueling culture wars and deepening national divides. He was a master strategist and media manipulator, achieving goals like overturning Roe v. Wade. But his success came at the cost of eroding democratic values and mutual respect. The chasm between red and blue America runs through the fault lines he created. Dobson's legacy power gained, but a nation left fractured and fearful.